Actress Natalie Wood was found dead in November 1981, her body floating near Catalina Island. Officials quickly ruled it an accidental drowning, but offered no further explanation. As witnesses came forward and stories shifted, suspicion only deepened. And at the very center of it all stood her husband, Robert Wagner. But what did he really say? And what has he finally admitted after all these years? On the night of November 28, 1981, the atmosphere aboard the yacht Splendor grew tense. Natalie Wood, her husband Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and Captain Dennis Davern had been drinking heavily. According to several accounts, including Davern's, an argument erupted between Wagner and Natalie not long before she disappeared around 11 p.m. That argument would become one of the last moments anyone recalled before tragedy struck. But the real mystery deepened, not just with Natalie's disappearance, but with Wagner's reaction afterward. Instead of immediately alerting the Coast Guard, Wagner waited more than 4 hours before reporting his wife missing. At 3:30 a.m., the Coast Guard finally received word that the Hollywood star was gone. By 5:11 a.m., official rescue teams were called in. Those crucial hours, when Natalie might still have been alive, were simply lost. Adding to the concern, the weather that night was anything but forgiving. Strong winds and rough waters surrounded Catalina Island, conditions that made the idea of accidentally falling into the water far more dangerous. For investigators, this made Wagner's delayed response all the more troubling. Why wait? Why risk everything when time was so critical? By 2018, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department publicly named Robert Wagner a person of interest in the case. Investigators pointed to the inconsistencies in his statements and his lack of cooperation with authorities. For many, it was a long overdue acknowledgement that the questions surrounding Wagner's role in Natalie's death could no longer be brushed aside. In the immediate aftermath of Natalie Wood's death, Captain Dennis Davern supported Robert Wagner's version of events. He repeated the claim that Natalie must have slipped while attempting to secure the yacht's dinghy, a theory that explained her drowning without raising further suspicion. For years, this account remained unchanged in official reports. But in the early 2000s, Davern altered his story. He admitted he had not been truthful and revealed that Wagner had pressured him to remain silent. According to Davern, the atmosphere aboard Splendor that night was tense, fueled by heavy drinking and Wagner's growing jealousy over Natalie's closeness with Christopher Walken. Davern described a heated confrontation inside the couple's cabin, during which he heard the sound of objects being thrown and raised voices arguing intensely. The noise ended abruptly, replaced by an unsettling silence. When Wagner finally came out, he told Davern simply that Natalie is missing. Instead of initiating a search, Wagner instructed him not to turn on the floodlights and not to radio for immediate help. To Davern, these commands were extraordinary, especially given the rough seas, high winds, and Natalie's well-known fear of water. His recollection made it clear that valuable time was lost by deliberate choice. Davern later admitted that he obeyed Wagner because he felt intimidated and uncertain, but the memory of that decision never left him. By 2011, when investigators reopened the case, Davern gave a new sworn statement, contradicting his earlier testimony. This time, he directly implicated Wagner, stating that the actor's behavior and orders had delayed any chance of saving Natalie. His revised account became a central part of the renewed investigation, transforming him from a passive witness into the most important insider willing to challenge Wagner's story. While the official reports described Natalie Wood's death as a silent accident, independent witnesses painted a far darker picture. On the night of November 28, 1981, Marilyn Wayne and her partner John Payne were anchored on a boat not far from the Splendor. Just before midnight, they heard the unmistakable sound of a woman crying for help. The cries were desperate, repeated over and over for nearly 15 minutes, cutting through the cold, windy night. The voice was clear enough that Marilyn and John were certain it was not a passing noise or a mistake. It was the cry of someone in distress, struggling in the water, calling out again and again for rescue. What disturbed them even more was the response they heard, a man's voice, calm and almost indifferent, answering, "Okay, honey." After that reply, no rescue came, and the cries eventually faded into silence. To the witnesses, this was not the picture of an accidental fall where a victim slipped quietly into the sea. It was evidence of someone alive, fighting to be saved, while those nearby either ignored or refused to act. Marilyn Wayne later reported the incident to authorities, but her testimony was not taken seriously in the early investigation. She even claimed to have received threats warning her to remain silent, which only deepened suspicions that powerful figures wanted the case closed quickly. This testimony directly challenged the initial narrative presented to the public. If Natalie had truly been calling out for 15 minutes, then her death was not an instant drowning. It suggested that there had been time to respond, time to intervene, and time to save her. The unanswered question remained: why did no one act, and who was the man who spoke those chilling words? For investigators revisiting the case decades later, Marilyn Wayne's account became one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence suggesting that Natalie Wood's death was not a simple accident. One of the most striking elements in Natalie Wood's story is her lifelong fear of dark, open water. From childhood, she carried an almost irrational terror, reinforced by a prophecy from a fortune teller who told her she would die in dark water. Her sister, Lana Wood, has repeated for years that Natalie would never have willingly stepped off a boat at night, especially in rough conditions. To Lana, the idea that Natalie tried to leave the yacht alone was impossible to believe. The night of November 28, 1981, was anything but calm. The waters around Catalina Island were rough, with cold temperatures, strong winds, and heavy waves. Earlier that evening, the group had been drinking heavily at a local restaurant before returning to the Splendor. Alcohol, tension, and worsening weather combined to create an atmosphere that was far from safe. Investigators also noted that the yacht's dinghy, which Natalie was said to have used, was never heard starting or moving that night. For a small boat, the sound of an outboard engine would have been unmistakable, yet none of the nearby witnesses recalled hearing it. This detail contradicted the initial theory that Natalie slipped while trying to secure or use the dinghy. When her body was recovered, Natalie was found wearing a flannel nightgown, a thick down jacket, and socks. These were not the clothes of someone preparing to climb into a small boat or take a stroll on deck. They were clothes for staying warm inside the cabin on a cold November night. Friends and crew who knew her also confirmed that Natalie never walked around the yacht alone after dark. The autopsy of Natalie Wood revealed details that made the official story increasingly difficult to accept. Her blood alcohol content measured 0.14%, a level considered legally intoxicated and enough to impair judgment and coordination. Along with alcohol, she had taken Dramamine, a motion sickness drug, and painkillers. The combination could have left her drowsy and unsteady, but it did not fully explain the physical evidence found on her body. Examiners noted multiple bruises on her arms and legs, as well as on the left side of her face. There were also fresh abrasions on her neck and cheek. While some bruising could be consistent with falling into the water or struggling to stay afloat, others appeared in unusual locations that suggested possible physical contact or even a struggle before she entered the ocean. Several marks were recent and could not be explained by accidental drowning alone. These findings gained new weight when considered alongside Robert Wagner's own admission. In later interviews, he conceded that during an argument with Christopher Walken that night, he smashed a wine bottle in anger. This directly contradicted his earlier claims that the evening had been calm and uneventful. The violent outburst fit with the possibility that tempers had escalated beyond words. And by 2012, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office formally amended Natalie Wood's death certificate. Instead of accidental drowning, the cause of death was reclassified as drowning and other undetermined factors. It also confirmed what many had long suspected. Natalie's death could not be explained simply as a tragic mishap. From the very beginning, Robert Wagner has been at the center of Natalie Wood's case. As her husband and the last person known to see her alive, his testimony carried enormous weight. Yet over the decades, his version of events has shifted, raising more questions than answers. In his initial 1981 statement, Wagner insisted that there had been no serious arguments aboard the yacht that night. He suggested that Natalie might have left the cabin to secure the dinghy and accidentally slipped into the water. It was a simple explanation, one that conveniently dismissed any conflict, but it clashed with what those close to Natalie knew about her lifelong fear of dark water. When the case was reopened in 2011, Wagner altered his account. This time, he admitted that a heated argument had occurred, though he claimed it was with Christopher Walken, not Natalie. The dispute, he said, revolved around Natalie's career and his jealousy over her close friendship with Walken. Wagner also confessed that in a fit of anger, he smashed a wine bottle, an explosive detail he had concealed in his first testimony. By 2018, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department officially named Wagner a person of interest. Detectives emphasized that his statements left troubling gaps in the timeline, particularly in the moments leading up to when Natalie was last seen. They also criticized his refusal to fully cooperate with the investigation. In 2011, the case of Natalie Wood's mysterious death was officially reopened. This decision was largely driven by new testimony from Captain Dennis Davern and several other witnesses whose accounts directly challenged the original narrative from 1981. Their statements, combined with forensic re-examinations, suggested that the events leading to Natalie's drowning were far more complex than once believed. Forensic experts reviewing the case noted that some of the bruises found on Natalie's body were inconsistent with a simple accidental fall into the water. The location and freshness of certain marks indicated that some level of struggle or physical altercation might have occurred before she entered the water. These findings cast doubt on the long-accepted theory that her death was a straightforward accident. Legally, the reclassification stopped short of labeling the death a homicide, but it significantly altered the framework of the investigation. It kept the case open to further inquiry and left room for the possibility of criminal responsibility, though no individual was formally charged. For Natalie's family, particularly her sister Lana Wood, the change was both painful and validating. Lana had long argued that the official version of events ignored glaring inconsistencies and silenced critical voices. The amended death certificate acknowledged what she and others had been saying for decades. Natalie Wood's death remained unresolved, and the truth demanded continued investigation. Even after 40 years, the legal and emotional implications of this reclassification ensured that Natalie's case would remain not only a haunting Hollywood mystery, but also an active question mark in American criminal history. Among all the voices that have spoken about Natalie Wood's death, none has been louder or more persistent than that of her younger sister, Lana Wood. For decades, Lana has insisted that Natalie would never have left the yacht willingly on that stormy night. She has repeatedly stated that her sister's fear of dark, open water was so profound that the idea of Natalie attempting to secure a dinghy in rough seas simply did not make sense. Lana's suspicions have always centered on Robert Wagner. She has publicly questioned his shifting accounts, his resistance to deeper investigations, and his unexplained delay in reporting Natalie missing. To her, these behaviors pointed to more than just grief. They suggested evasion. In 2021, Lana reignited the public's attention with her memoir, where she revealed another haunting chapter of Natalie's life. She wrote that at just 16 years old, Natalie had confided in her about being sexually assaulted by actor Kirk Douglas, an encounter allegedly arranged by their mother under the guise of helping Natalie's career. The revelation cast a darker shadow over Natalie's early years in Hollywood, showing how vulnerability and exploitation were woven into her story long before her tragic death. Lana has remained one of Wagner's fiercest critics, challenging the inconsistencies in his testimony and condemning what she views as a deliberate effort to obscure the truth. For her, the fight is not simply about assigning blame. It is about preserving her sister's dignity and ensuring that Natalie Wood is remembered not only for her talent and beauty, but for the unanswered questions surrounding her final night. To Lana, the pursuit of justice is both personal and symbolic. She believes that uncovering the truth about Natalie's death is the only way to close a chapter of Hollywood's most haunting mystery, and at the same time, to honor the memory of a sister whose light was extinguished far too soon. In the early 1980s, Hollywood operated under an unspoken code that prioritized protecting reputations over uncovering uncomfortable truths. When Natalie Wood died in November 1981, that culture shaped how her case was handled. The official report of accidental drowning came quickly, without serious consideration of the bruises on her body, the delay in reporting her missing, or the contradictions in Robert Wagner's statements. Robert Wagner's status as an established actor added to this shield. Police interviews with him were limited, and he was never pressed about why he waited hours to contact the Coast Guard. Instead of a thorough investigation, the tragedy was quietly filed away, allowing Wagner to continue his career largely untouched. The silence extended beyond the case itself. Decades later, Natalie's sister Lana revealed in her memoir that when Natalie was just 16, she had been sexually assaulted by Kirk Douglas. Their mother had arranged the meeting, hoping it would help Natalie's career. Instead, it left her traumatized. That story, like many others in Hollywood at the time, was deliberately buried to protect a powerful man's image. Witnesses from the night of Natalie's disappearance also felt the weight of suppression. Marilyn Wayne, who reported hearing cries for help, later said she was threatened and discouraged from speaking out. Captain Dennis Davern admitted years later that he had been pressured to keep quiet about what really happened on the yacht. Only decades later, with the rise of the #MeToo movement, did the environment shift enough for these accounts to be taken seriously. The reclassification of Natalie's death certificate in 2012, changing the cause to drowning and other undetermined factors, reflected this new willingness to confront what had long been ignored. What once was dismissed as an accident began to be seen as a story clouded by silence, influence, and deliberate omission. In 2018, Robert Wagner was officially named a person of interest in the case of Natalie Wood's death. Investigators pointed to contradictions between his accounts and those of key witnesses like Captain Dennis Davern. Despite the reopening of the case in 2011, Wagner declined further interviews and refused to cooperate, leaving crucial questions unanswered. Christopher Walken, who was also on board the yacht, gave a single interview in 2012 that repeated his original story, then withdrew completely from the discussion. Meanwhile, forensic findings and witness testimony have increasingly suggested that Natalie's death may not have been the simple accident first declared. Now, as Wagner reaches his 95th birthday in 2025, he continues to remain silent, appearing only at private family gatherings. The case itself is still open, and the silence from those who know the most ensures that Natalie Wood's death remains one of Hollywood's most haunting mysteries. Do you believe Robert Wagner's silence hides the truth, or is he simply protecting himself from endless speculation? Share your thoughts in the comments below.